Hi everybody, my name is Jens Larsen. Quartal harmony is a huge part of the modern jazz sound, and in this video I'm going to take a progression that we are probably all familiar with, so that's a 12-bar blues in the key of F, and then I'm going to show you how you can come through that only using quartal harmony. So with these quartal harmony voicings you get a fairly different sound from what you would normally get if you're just playing the chords in a more standard way, and it's going to be a little bit less clear, but it's also going to have a completely different sound and something that you can use and throw in there as a variation to the normal sound when you're comping it. I've already made a few videos on quartal harmony, both using it as chord voicings and also using it as arpeggios in your solo lines. And if you want to check out some of those videos, I'll link to them in the description of this video. To get started using these voicings on a blues in F, we need a set of voicings for each of the chords in the progression. We can take the F7 chord and then harmonize the scale that goes along with it in fourths. So that would be a B flat major or an F mixolydian scale, and the voicings we get if we use the middle string set would be these. One way that I suggest you can try and get used to the sound of these voicings and get used to using them on one of these chords is to maybe play them on one single chord at a time. So if we take these first voicing for the F7 and then just play them over an F pedal point, that could be something like this. I'm using all the voicings in the scale, but it's not all of them that are really conveying the sound of the chord. And that's also a little bit a part of the sound of quartal harmony, that you often will use more voicings per chord, and that sort of the collected sound of the voicings will give you the sound of the chord. So if we look at it, so of course this first one here will sound completely like an F7 with a 13, but actually this sounds like an F7 sus4. And this does sound kind of like an F chord, but it could also be a minor chord, or it could be an F6. It doesn't have to be an F7. And here we have something that could be an F6 or an F7 chord. So in that way, it's a little bit ambiguous what's going on. And what you end up doing is that you probably gravitate towards sort of having the ones that are a little bit more clear. And that can even be a question of taste. I would say especially the ones with the major third are the ones you want to have in there. So this one is a good one to end on, and this one as well, and that will actually hold for pretty much all the dominant chords that I'm gonna cover in this lesson. If we do the same for B flat 7 and harmonize the scale that goes with it, so in this case B flat 7 would be B flat mixolydian or E flat major, then we get these voicings. And in the same way, it can be really useful to apply these to just a pedal point B flat 7. So that'll be something like this. The next chord we have is an F7 altered in bar 4, and the F7 altered scale is the same as a G flat minor melodic, and if we harmonize that we get these voicings. And using an F7 altered as a sort of pedal point, we get this kind of sound. When you harmonize a melodic minor scale and quartal voicings, you get a few odd voicings that you probably didn't expect to see in there. I think especially this one, which turns out to be an F7 shell voicing. Because we're using it on an F7 altered, then it's actually quite handy to have it in there because it's very clear. And I think also when you listen to the example of me just comping on a static F7 altered, we're kind of hearing this as something that wants to resolve, and if we don't have the core sound of the chord in there, we do have a lot of alterations and you can still hear that. The next chord we get is a B flat 7, and I already covered that. but after that we get a B diminished, and B diminished doesn't necessarily have a quartal voicing associated with it. But if we look at this voicing for a B diminished, which is one I use quite a lot, so that's a B diminished with an added flat 6, then the top of this one is in fact a quartal voicing. In keeping with the style that you kind of expect to hear when you hear Quartal Harmony, you probably expect diminished chord to be played with the diminished scale. And if I take this voicing and then move it through the diminished scale, then you get this. After the B diminished, we get an F7, which is something that we already covered, and then we get an A half diminished, which is actually the same as the F7 in terms of voicings. And then we get a D7 altered. So D7 altered is E flat melodic minor, and that harmonized would be this. From the D7 we go to G minor 7, and that's of course a G minor as a second degree in F major, so that would be this set of voicings. The type of G minor sound that you would expect when you're playing these type of voicings is probably going to be very closely related to a G minor 13 type sound, so something like this. So it can make sense to just get used to that, because maybe in other more sort of bop oriented stuff you're not going to really find a G minor 13 that often as a 2 chord. But you can actually work with that sound, just get used to it in the same way that I demonstrated in the other one. So and on the dominant we're going to use a C7 altered, so that's going to be this set of voicing from D flat melodic minor or the C alter scale. So with these voicings you can cover an entire blues in F. And now let's just go over the example that I played in the beginning, and I'll talk a little bit about why I choose the voicings that I do, and also how I transition from one chord to the next. So the first voicing is a really basic F7 voicing that you would also recognize as an F7-13, and it is nice to just start with something that's really still familiar and that we are connecting with the progression, so that we're not completely jumping into thin air right away. The next thing I do is I'm actually just walking up and making a simple melody up to the B flat 7, and the voicing I want to use on the B flat 7 eventually is going to be also this B flat 13, and then I'm just going to take the voicings from the F7 and walk up there, and then I'll end up here. Now I need to go back from the B flat 7 to the F7, and if I want to use this F7 voicing, so the easiest way to do that is actually just to take the B flat 7 voicing that's a half step above that, and then I can just sort of slide in there. And then from here I walk up to the altered voicing here, and then up to this really clear sort of F7 altered voicing, which is of course just a sharp 9 voicing essentially, and that resolves nicely down to a clear B flat 7, and then into the B diminished. And here, because we're coming out of the diminished, the main thing is actually just that we return to the F, and having the B and the E resolve to C and F is kind of enough in this case. Then we go up to the A half diminished, a very clear D7, and then, as I talked about with the G minor 7, it's nice to just have that G minor 13 sound. And then to get to the C7 altered, I walk up, and then I can actually sort of shift parallel down to this sound. This chord doesn't actually contain any third or any seventh from C7, but in the context, because it's like sharp 11, flat 13 and flat 9, it's still gonna sound like an altered dominant, like this. So that's why that works. So, and then again, just repeating that voicing and walking up. And then for the last F, I'm using this voicing, which is, of course, something you can look at being like an F6-9, or you can look at it as being sort of the top part of an F7 with a 13. And then I I'll just move around from there. So the D7 is just going to be this one. And then moving that up to this G7, which is actually just a G sus, but it's a little bit more about the context, I think, here. And then again using these two voicings, which actually, again, we have a B flat, but we don't have an E. But in the context, because we have this bass note, it's still gonna work as a C7 altered kind of sound when you have both of them. And then I resolve that to this F voicing again. So in this main example, I'm keeping it a bit clear, but you can actually go a little bit further. So if we just take a look at a few options for the turnaround, then another one could be this. Or if we move the other way. Or something like this. So as you can tell, when you're using this type of voicing, you're really opening up the sound of the F blues. If you want to learn more about using arpeggios or different chord voicings or interesting scales over chords, then subscribe to my channel. I publish a new lesson every Thursday, and I've been doing this for quite some time, so there's already a lot of stuff available on my channel. If you want me to make a video on how to use this type of sound, but then not as a chord voicing, but more as an arpeggio, then leave a comment on this video. If you want to stay up to date and get a notification whenever I upload a new video, then click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button here on YouTube. That way you'll get a push notification or an email every time I upload a video. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.